Hey y'all, hey, and welcome to Drawn Conclusions with me, Christina B. This case is really odd as a whole, and you'll see what I mean. It's one of the most odd and mysterious cases that I've come across, and it takes place in Canada. Let's discuss. Cynthia Elizabeth Hawk James was born in Richmond, British Columbia. She was affectionately known as Cindy. She was the oldest of 6 children, and at 19 she married Dr. Roy McPeace, who was 38 at the time. He was 18 years older than her. Cindy graduated from nursing school in 1966. She worked as a nurse for some time before she became the administrator at a preschool that specialized in children with behavioral and emotional issues. In July of 1982, Cindy decided to end her marriage and she and Roy got divorced. About 4 months later, she started receiving strange and threatening phone calls. She first went to her parents, saying she didn't recognize the voice, and sometimes it sounded like it could be different voices. Sometimes they were whispering, sometimes they were threatening, sometimes they didn't say anything at all, just called and breathed in the phone. But either way, it was creeping her out. As the harassment turned to death threats that she was getting not only by phone, but also by mail, she decided to go to the police. Over the next 7 years, she reported almost 100 incidents of harassment, which included physical attacks. The situation became notably worse once the police were involved. She would come home and find her porch light shattered and her phone lines had been cut, along with several dead cats that had been left in her front yard. A friend of hers, Agnes, recalled that notes would show up on her doorstep with letters that had been cut out of a magazine, and there had even been a note left on her car that depicted a corpse being taken to the morgue. Raw meat had been delivered to her house, and her dog had even become victim to this. One day, when she came home from work, she found her dog sitting in its own feces, scared to death, with a cord wrapped tightly around her neck. The harassment came in waves, making Cindy paranoid and unstable. In January of 1983, Agnes stopped by to visit Christy one evening. When she knocked on the door, nobody answered, so she decided to go around to the back door, thinking maybe Cindy was in the bath, something like that, and just didn't hear her knock. When she was walking around to the back of the house, she ran into Cindy, who was crouched down with a nylon stocking tightly wrapped around her neck. Cindy said that she had gone to the garage to get a box and someone had grabbed her from behind. She didn't see the person's face or any identifying features. She only noticed their white shoes. The police didn't believe her claims or take her seriously, so she decided to move. She even painted her car, changed her last name, and hired a private investigator named Ozzy. The police questioned Cindy a few times and found that she was withholding information. Because of this, they gave her a polygraph test, which confirmed that she had been leaving something out. Ozzy also confirmed that Cindy wasn't telling the full story. Cindy also tried hypnosis at this time, but the operator found that she was too traumatized for there to be good results. Her mother thought that she was withholding information in order to protect her family, assuming that the attacker had threatened the family if Cindy was to say anything about who it was doing this to her. So Ozzy installed lights all around Cindy's home, and he also gave her a two-way radio just to make sure that they could have communication in the event that her phone lines got cut again. On the two-way radio, there was also a panic button, and he told her should anything happen, if she can't talk, what have you, press the panic button, and he'll just come right over. On January 30th, 1984, Ozzy heard strange noises coming from the two-way radio that he had given to Cindy. He dropped everything and went to her house. But when he got there, he found the doors were locked. When he looked through the window, he could see her laying on the floor with a paring knife through her hand. She was taken to the hospital and said she remembered being injected with something during the attack, and there was indeed a needle mark in her arm. But police didn't find any fingerprints at the scene, or anyone that could corroborate Cindy's claims. The harassing phone calls were always too short to be traced, and they never occurred during the times when the police officers were actually surveilling her home. But as soon as they stopped surveillance, another incident would occur. Police became increasingly more skeptical and believed that Cindy was doing this to herself. Maybe she had a split personality and didn't remember that she was actually doing these things to herself. Cindy's parents, on the other hand, believed that the attacker was very calculated and wanted people to think just that Cindy was crazy and that it was no real threat. Ozzy also vouched for Cindy, adamant that no one would be able to do that to themselves. On December 11th, 1985, Cindy was found in a ditch 6 miles from her home. She was semi-conscious, hypothermic, and wearing a man's boot and a glove. She was also covered in cuts and bruises. She again had a black nylon stocking wrapped around her neck and a needle mark on her arm, but she said she had no memory of what happened to her. After this incident, Cindy asked her friend Agnes if she would stay with her. Agnes and her husband, Tom, agreed to stay with Cindy for a while. One night in April, noises coming from the basement woke up Agnes and Tom. When they went to check it out, they found the basement was on fire and the phone lines had been cut. Tom ran to a neighbor's home to get help, but on his way there, he saw a man standing on the curb and asked him to call 911. And the man just turned around and ran away. The police suspected that Cindy staged the fire as they assumed that it had been set inside. And the only way that somebody would have been able to get inside the house, according to them, was through this small window, and they didn't think that would have been possible. They also noted that Cindy was still walking her dog at night, which to them meant that she was not truly fearful, which gave claim to them feeling like she was attacking herself or setting this up to get attention for whatever reason. After this, Cindy was committed to a psychiatric ward. Her doctor feared that she was now suicidal. She stayed at the hospital for 10 weeks. When she left the hospital, she finally confided in her family that she had been holding something back and that she thought she knew who the person was that was doing all of this to her. She said that she was going to confront them herself, but instead she went to the police and told them that she thought the person doing this was her ex-husband, Roy. The police encouraged her to call Roy and confront him, and they would record the whole entire phone call, to catch him admitting that he was doing this. And she did, but Roy denied any involvement. In October of 1988, Roy got a message on his answering machine. The message was a raspy voice saying, "Cindy, dead meat soon." Later that month, when Cindy came home from work, she was attacked in her carport. She was found sometime later, unconscious, naked from the waist down, with a black nylon stocking tightly wrapped around her neck, her arms and legs hog-tied and taped wrapped over her mouth. This attack caused her to slip into a coma, but she soon recovered. By the spring of 1989, the attacks seemed to be decreasing, and Cindy told her family that she was feeling better for the first time in a long time. But in May, Cindy vanished. Her car was found in the parking lot of a shopping center, and there were groceries and a wrapped gift inside. There was blood on the driver's side door, and the contents of her wallet were found underneath the car. 2 weeks later, on June 8, 1989, a body was found in the yard of an abandoned house in Vancouver. It was soon discovered that it was Cindy. She was 44. She had been drugged, strangled, and bound with her hands and feet tied behind her back. She also had a black nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck. An autopsy revealed that she passed from an overdose of morphine, flurazepam, and other drugs. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the Mounties, ruled her death as a suicide and closed the case in July. They believe that she had again staged the scene, and this time they had just gone too far. The coroner, though, ruled her death as an unknown event, stating that it wasn't a suicide or a murder and that it couldn't have been an accident. Her parents always believed that she had been murdered after being stalked, harassed, and tortured for over 7 years. Ozzy also doesn't believe that she committed suicide. He believes that her body was dumped where it was found. He thinks if she had been there the whole time, it wouldn't have taken 2 weeks for her to be found, being that the area was heavily trafficked by cars and pedestrians. Also, with the amount of drugs in her system, she wouldn't have been able to get from the location where her car was left to this house on her own. The yard where she was found was over 1.5 miles away from the shopping center where she parked. And would she really be able to tie up her own hands and feet behind her back and tightly tie the nylon stocking around her neck after injecting herself or before injecting herself? Either way would be impossible. Also, no syringe or needle was found in her car or at the scene where her body was found, which leads me to believe that it was taken with whoever actually did this, or it was left at the place where she was actually killed. Cindy also had a lover by the name of Pat McBride that just happened to be a cop. If he was the perpetrator, it would explain how no calls or attacks happened while the police were surveilling her house. It would also explain how all of the calls were short enough to not be traced. The length of a traceable phone call is not common knowledge. And back in the 80s, it was not something that could have been Googled for people to find out. Both Pat and Roy were persons of interest in this case, but there was just not enough information to tie either one of them to it. So like I said, this one was, or is, really mysterious and crazy. I do believe that she was definitely killed. I do not think that she did this to herself. The most obvious candidate for who did this is Roy, in my mind. And I think that what the parents said is true. This was a very calculated thing. He tortured her. Well, not saying Roy did it, but whoever this was, tortured her for 7 years, made her look crazy, made her not be believable by the police so that her case was not really investigated. I mean, obviously she was killed. Who can tie their own hands behind their back and tie a stocking around their neck and inject themselves with a fatal concoction of medications? It's just not physically possible. It just makes more sense that she was murdered, and I wish that the police had taken this more seriously and actually investigated this more. I know her father has already passed away. I'm not sure about her mother. Her sister also did write a book about her. I think it's called Who Killed Cindy James, My Sister, My Friend. Don't quote me on that, but you can buy it on Amazon. I did just read the excerpt, did not read the book, but it seemed like a pretty good read, but that was written by one of her younger sisters. I do pray that one day this family will get justice. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Please like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Talk shit if you got to. You know I love you. Be great. Be you. I'll see you soon.